All right, everyone should have this file downloaded. Last week we learned about the pen tool, how to click and make nodes, what directional anchors look like. When you click and drag lines, you get curves. Everyone kind of struggled through the how far I pull, which direction I drag my mouse when I'm curving lines in order to get the right curve. Convex, concave, how the line works. We learned a little bit about removing the forward anchor. So if you go back to that center pin point, you get the little V, inverted V shape, which allows us to remove the forward directional anchor. As homework, you were to continue to draw your SpongeBob. I did put Patrick on there too if you wanted a little extra practice. Drawing, quite honestly, is just a little practice. If you're using the pen tool or you're using, really, honestly, paintbrush, pencil, line segment, shape tool, it doesn't matter. It's just a little practice in order to get a little more comfortable with it. So it comes down to like how much of an interest you have in learning to draw versus learning to compose. So today we're going to do a little bit of both. We're going to do a little drawing, and we're also going to do a little composing, because there's really two ways to tackle Illustrator and logo design. You can compose from elements you purchase or gather, preferably vector art, like we did with Vectiti, or you can create new, or you can do a combination of both. And in this case, we're going to do a combination of both. Originally, from our word search, kind of creative cross-referencing, we did a couple of classes ago for the Keep Rome Beautiful concept. We had clock tower, we had hills, we had rivers, were kind of the three things we pulled. So I went out and I grabbed a photo of the clock tower. I thought that was probably a pretty good place to start. A couple of different versions of mountains or hills, and some basic water shapes. I moved those together in Illustrator to create a basic composition. It's not set in stone, it's just getting me started thinking about how things would overlap, what they would look like, how they would compose. I typed out some very basic type. That is not set in stone, that's not the font. I don't love it. I just dropped it in there so I could see scale and proportion for what a logo should look like. A logo should, in most cases, be what's called a combination mark, which means there is an illustration of some kind and there is text of some kind. Eventually, if you get really big like Starbucks, they remove the word Starbucks and you get the mermaid. Nike had the swoosh with the Nike. Eventually, they got rid of the Nike text and it's just the swoosh. It's really hard to be known as a symbol. Typically, you start as a combination mark and you eventually remove the text component and you only have the symbol component. A really well-balanced brand typically has both. So we're going to create what's called combination marks, which means we're going to have some text for our nonprofit and we're going to have a symbol of some kind for our nonprofit, whether it's a church or a small business or whatever it is. So all I did was take some elements that I came up with as part of my concept and compose them. Now, you may see when you opened up the file, if you go over here and you see your layers, you're going to see that I have two layers, just like we did with SpongeBob. SpongeBob's background image was just a template layer, and then a new layer was added on top called the artwork layer. The template layer is locked. You can't move it, you can't adjust it, so we can just naturally draw on top of it. And remember, when we drew with SpongeBob, when we created a line we loved, it created an item on that layer and we locked it so we could draw the next thing. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to get our basic shapes in, one shape at a time, lock them as we love them, and then when we go back and we have all of our parts created, we're going to unlock those parts so we can manipulate them. So we're just going to start with an element, top concept. So just imagine this is 2, 3, 4 concepts. This is just 2 here. And we're going to start creating a vector version of it. We're using the elements as inspiration, but we have the creative license to kind of modify, change it, tweak it as we want. And you're going to see when we do the water We're going to create one water line, and then we're going to replicate it and kind of find how it fits together so that we get the basic idea. This isn't like set in stone. We're just using it as inspiration. So any of you that are like, oh my gosh, I can't draw anything, like I'm not good at that part, we're using elements that were found elements, and we're just creating a concept based on them. You could swing this completely 180 the other direction, and you could take a picture of the clock tower. You could go take some photos of a mountain. You could go take some pictures of things and use them as inspiration. Lots of times when I'm doing mascots for companies, I'll use the photo of an animal as inspiration so that I can see the scale of the eyes, where the nose is located, whatever the thing is I'm drawing, and then I'll create my shapes in Illustrator using the scale and proportion of the elements of the photograph as a starting point. And that way I don't have to know there are X number of eyes between the two eyes for a leopard. I don't need to know that there's 3 inches between the eyes and the tip of the nose. I have a photograph for that. So that will allow me to at least know the scale and proportion of things. Now I swing the needle way past that, and I create basically my own drawing of it with my own kind of personality in it. But it's okay to have references for you to kind of make sure you get it right. I don't want my leopard to look like a cheetah. I want my leopard to look like a leopard. I don't want my dog to look like a Weimaraner. I want my dog to look like a golden retriever. So it's okay to feed your brain with inspiration. All right, so you should have this opened up. Remember, Command plus, Command minus zooms in and zooms out. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on my document, and I'm going to hold down the space bar so that I can pan my canvas over so that I just basically have my symbol in the middle of the page. Because I'm going to use the clock tower for my first doodle drawing part to this logo, just so we can see the pen tool again, kind of touch it again, kind of practice it a little bit again. Now, as we do this, it's okay if yours is different. Like, we're following general shapes of this clock tower so we can get something that can be stitched on a shirt or screen printed or made into something, cut out of steel, like all the reasons you would want to apply your logo to different media, different textures. Like, there has to be flexibility in it. That's why last class, or the class before last, we were talking about how the logos have to work in black and white. They have to be simple line elements to start with, and then we can add color later, because if you want to punch it into metal or stamp it into something or emboss it, it has to be simple enough to do that. Okay, so let's select our pen tool. Let's go over to our pen tool, third tool down. Now, what did we do last class to make it easiest to draw so we could see everything we're drawing over the top of? What did we change over in the properties of the pen tool over there? Yes, no fill color. No fill color. So remember in the toolbar, right down in the 2 squares there, one probably defaults to white, and then the stroke defaults to black. Remember to hit the little red slash line so that your fill is none. We want to just be able to draw over top of this thing, and we don't want it to be covered up as we doodle over the top of it. We want to be able to just draw it. Now, I work outside in. So like when I'm creating something, and maybe I'm using a photo I took, or some kind of a scanned item or something, I'll start with the outline, and then I'll work my way around. So you'll notice this clock tower kind of has this tapered, it's got a couple of curves, but for the most part, it's pretty direct, straight lines. And you'll also notice when I placed my elements in, I kind of put it behind the mountain and kind of behind the water. My idea is kind of to have that in the distance, kind of have the hills in the front, and then maybe have water kind of running off the side under the letters a little bit. So let's take our pen tool, and I'm actually going to start my line. I'm going to make one continuous line. I'm going to start my line on the left-hand edge, right where kind of the left side of the clock tower touches the hill. Now, do we need to do every nook and cranny around the outside edge of this clock tower? No, if I want to stitch it on a t-shirt, I can't have like every little nook and cranny, because when you scale it down to the size of a stamp, it's going to look all together anyway. I only need the general shape. So you're going to see like the wall has that kind of walkway has multiple pillars. I'm only going to kind of do the general pillar kind of beginning of the railing of this thing. I don't need everything. So I'm just going to kind of take my mouse and kind of trace along the outside of this. And there's no wrong answer. So we just need a general shape of the clock tower. And you're going to notice I'm doing mostly just kind of straight lines as I click along this thing. There's only a couple of curves, and the curves I'm going to make are going to be the interior ones. Do I need the railing at the very top there? I mean, is that an important part of the clock tower? I don't have any idea. I've never climbed up there. Has anyone climbed up there? You're allowed to walk up that thing or something, aren't you? Yeah, I think you're allowed to go up to at least that little pillar area. I haven't done it yet, but I think it's on my bucket list, so I probably have to do that. All right, so I'm probably going to tuck in my line a little bit and do the very railing at the top. I don't know if you can get up there, but I feel like you should be able to because that is a railing up there. So let's just follow our line around, just very basic shape. We're just getting the gist of this thing because I'm going to talk you through kind of the thought process of what lines you pick from a shape standpoint and which ones that you don't. And you'll notice I'm like not even really curving anything yet. I'm just kind of doing a basic shape here, just so that we can get the outline of this thing. Now, when you get over to the right side, I'm going to go behind the wave because this thing does go down to there. And so I'm going to just do that basic shape. That's it. Just trace the outside of it. Probably your default stroke weight's 1, but we'll double check that in a minute. And you'll notice that I haven't clicked away or anything, so it's actually trying to ask me if I want to continue the line. I don't. Bless you. I want to make this thing kind of unified in the end. So I'm not going to close this shape. It's just going to be a line that goes around the outside. And when we get done with this, you're going to be like, why does anyone use those super simple stick figures for things? Because you can do a better body shape for a running person or something like that. Now, when you get all the way around the building, you can see if you hold your command key down, you'll actually get a little white arrow, You can click your mouse anywhere outside of the building and it will deselect that line. The command key is just the short key command, so you don't have to go back to the move tool, deselect, go back to the pen, draw another line. You can hold the command key down and it'll allow you to deselect lines as you go. Now, so we should have a basic little shape, just like that. All right, now, over in the artboard layer, right, this is what we did with SpongeBob, so if you hit the little triangle to kind of go into the expanded area of the artwork layer, that's where our objects or our shapes and lines that we created should appear. Remember, during the SpongeBob process last class, we locked each element as we created it. I still want to do that. So let's lock the outline of the clock tower. Because now we have to go in and start creating the things that give this personality. So what is something you think inside the clock tower kind of architecture would be important to create in this line art? Clock, right? So let's create the clock. So let's go over to our shape tool. So right over here in our shape tool, let's go to our ellipse. Now, if you were going to invisibly draw a horizontal line at the top of the clock and a horizontal line vertically from the left side of the clock, where that spot meets is a really easy way to create a shape that kind of looks like it's about the same size. So you see how I put my cursor right here? I put my cursor right here because it's about the horizontal line there and about the visual vertical line there. So if we click and drag, I can actually drag a circle That's pretty close. We'll worry about the hands later, because I'm not sure what time of day I want it to be. My wife works up at the elementary school, and someone cheekily set the clock to 5 o'clock. So the middle school building is set to 5 o'clock. I walked out and looked up, and I'm like, 5 o'clock somewhere. Like, who did that?
You have to be so accurate.
Where are you getting this circle?
Inside the rectangle. So you see the little rectangle over there? Hold your mouse down when you click on the rectangle, and you'll see ellipse. If there is a little tiny triangle in the corner of the tool, it means it's an expandable menu. So all of the shapes, the star, the line segment, the rectangle, the circle, they tuck them all in so that your toolbar isn't super long. All right, very good. Don't worry about the hands. Do you think the time around the clock is important? All the Roman numerals? No, not in logo world, because remember, this has to work the size of a stamp. If we shrink this thing really small down, you're not going to see that. I think the hands are important, and we'll deal with those in a minute when we figure out what time we're going to set our clock to, and everyone can set it to a different time, I suppose. All right, now, next thing that you think might be important inside the image of this clock tower. Some architectural detail that you're like, man, I think that would really define that clock.
The windows?
Yeah, the little X's or stars or whatever those things are up towards the top of the tower. Like, I don't know if there must be a bell up there because it does chime every hour or a couple of times a day or something. So there must be some kind of automated bell up there. All right, so let's lock our ellipse circle that we created just so that we can continue to draw and not touch objects. Because the way the pen tool works is if I mistakenly click or move my mouse over that ellipse, it'll actually let me add a node. It'll let me add more points to the circle. How many points does a circle have? 4, right? 4. So if we click on the circle line, then we'll have 5, 6, 7, 8. We only need 4 for that. So where you don't want to click on it again. But there might be a case where we would need to add a node. Click on it so that we could use our direct select and change the line a little bit. Typically a circle isn't one of them. All right, so let's switch back to our pen tool. And I'm going to zoom in even a little bit more. So Command plus, hold the space bar down so we can pan over to the little windows. The beauty about a photo is we're going to get perfect perspective. So we know those are angled a little bit, right? The two on the side are actually angled a little bit, and the one in the front is straight on. The reason I picked this photo is because I didn't want a weird perspective of the clock tower where you saw multiple faces of the clock or anything like that. Because remember, we have to be able to scale this thing down. We need to be able to embroider it on a bag. The clock tower is a line art. Embroidered on a travel bag would be awesome. Like, I haven't seen any of those downtown, but that would be pretty cool. It's unique to here, and it's an interesting shape. Like, there's a lot of aspects to it that are pretty cool. All right, so let's take the pen tool, and I'm actually going to just click my mouse and go to the other corner of the first line and click. So that is my line segment. I'm going to hold my Command key down and click away so that I deselect that line. And I'm going to do the next X. Click on the corner and go to the other angle. I'm going to hold my Command key down and deselect that line. I'm only doing Command deselect so I can draw another line without switching. Because remember, if I click there, look, my mouse wants me to continue that line. I have to do Command to deselect so that I get that first little kind of star shape. So we want to do that for each of the 3 windows. Should either of the side window lines touch the outline?
No.
They should not, because there is space there. There are pillars. They should look like they're floating kind of in the middle of the illustration so that you can get the personality of it. So I'm going to do this one, click. I'm going to do my Command to deselect that line. I'm going to do the next one. I'm going to use Command to deselect my line. I'm going to do the middle one. Use Command to deselect my line. So very simple, straight lines. And some of you might be like, hey, I can draw if all I have to do is straight lines. And so you should have something that looks roughly like this. Now, once you have the 3 windows created, so this will look a little something like that. Let's use our selection tool, our regular black selection arrow. So we're going to switch to that. And we're going to draw a selection box over the 3 windows. So we're just going to click, hold our mouse down, and drag. Why is it not selecting the outside of the tower? It's locked, right? That's the key to locking. We're creating one element at a time. And by one element at a time, I mean anything that goes together. So you see the 3 circles, I believe there's 3 circles that run across kind of the middle of this image. The wreath is over it right now, but I believe there's 3 circles. That is an element. So when we create that, we're going to create them together before we go on to the next thing. Now, once we create an element, we want to group it, which is probably command what? G. So now we have this thing together. Why is that important? Because if you look over in our artwork layer, now all of those lines are one item. All the lines are one item. So we don't have path, 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 path every time we create something. So we're just creating elements as a grouping based on like things. And in this case, the windows are all one thing. Now, let's lock those. Now, next thing, what do you think? Are those 3 circles kind of where the wreath probably is important? I think they are. They're architectural, and they're clean, and they're simple. They'll add to the personality of this thing. So let's switch to our ellipse tool. So we'll switch to the old ellipse tool, or circle tool. We're going to click and drag and create a little circle. Now, once you create one circle, so let's click and drag and create one circle. Let's go back to our regular move tool, the black arrow. You see the little dot in the middle of your circle? That is called like the waist of an object. It's the center point of an object. If you click and hold your mouse down and do Shift Option, you can drag a copy perfectly off of that circle. So Shift Option actually lets you drag copies of objects perfectly across the page or up the page or on a 45-degree angle. So I could select that circle and do Command C, Command V, but it'll just paste it in the middle of the artboard. I can draw another circle, but it won't be the exact same size of that circle. But I can do Shift Option and drag a copy. So let's do that one more time. Click on the middle of the waist, hold your mouse down, Shift Option, drag, let go of your mouse before the Shift Option key, and it will drag a perfect third circle. So you should have 3 circles that are perfectly the same size in perfect alignment. Now the beauty is with the smart guides, I can do Command C, Command V, and just make a copy, and the smart guides will find the perfect horizontal matchup to the circle. It'll find it because the smart guides look for the commonality of horizontal and vertical lines.
Shouldn't the middle circle be bigger?
I don't know. Is it bigger? Somebody tell me. I mean, it was built a long time ago, so I'm going to guess they made one and made the other 2 exactly the same. Okay, something weird that happened. Something weird always happens, so don't worry about it. Oh, it's because you have a fill. So you see that little fill right there? A little red X. Voila. Beautiful. All right, very good. Everyone okay? It looks great. Now, so let's just see what our drawing looks like. Let's group our circles first. So let's take our selection arrow and let's drag a big selection box over our 3 circles and Command G. And let's lock those circles. So let's hit the little arrow next to the template layer. And the very bottom object is the clock tower. So let's unlock it. and then click the little eyeball so you can see what it looks like. It's coming along. We need more detail because right now it looks like a chef hat with a weird looking person wearing it. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So once you take a look at what yours looks like, let's go ahead and click the eyeball and turn it back on, and let's relock the template layer. So click the little eyeball and then relock the template layer. Just so you can kind of see what yours looks like. Now, what do we think here?
The squares about the stars.
Which one? You want to make the windows actual windows? Let's hold off on that for just a second. I'm curious as to when you shrink it down to like that, whether you're going to really hinder your windows by putting boxes around them. Let's do, you see the little straight line, curve arch, straight line of the detail around the clock? This thing right here, this is kind of a detail I think maybe we should create. So let's take our mouse and let's click a line, pull straight across, click a line. Now, if I was going to try to curve that line so that it's a nice little arc, where do you think I would click my mouse and pull? Yeah, you do have to drag directly across. At the peak or the top of that kind of arch, which is the center of the clock tower, you see right here, if you click and drag directly across so that my guide is straight. See how my guide is straight? If I let go and go to the other area of the arch, it makes a perfect arch. So if you drag 90 degrees when you hold your mouse down, you will get a perfect straight curve, like an equal arc on both sides of your node. So click your mouse in the middle of that arch or the middle of that window, hold your mouse down, pull to the right about almost to the point of that third window, corner of the third window, if you see my directional anchor, and then let go, and then it'll actually continue the curve if you let your mouse go and go to that corner and click, and you should get kind of, if it's not smooth, do Command Z and try that arch again. Try to get some, I'm going to try to make this as kind of equally balanced on both sides of this thing. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but kind of equally balanced, I guess is the best way to put it. And then I'm going to flatten out my line. So there is my curve. If your curve isn't great, you can do Command Z, and you can try it again. You do Command Z all the way back to where the line wasn't even drawn, and start at the left again. It's kind of one of those things you just kind of practice. You can always undo. Now, should that curve touch the window line? It should not. It should not, because remember, when we shrink this thing really small down, we don't want it to look like it's all blended together. So once I have my line created, I'm going to go back to my Move tool and click on that line and use my arrow keys and nudge it down a little bit. So you see how you can do up and down? Just put it somewhere so it's kind of equally in the middle. And you'll see that it kind of finds a space in between the Windows lines and the clock circle. Now, if we needed to change one of those points, we can use our white arrow, which is our selection arrow, and click on any of the nodes and use our arrow keys. So if you are too close to that line, you can use the direct select arrow, pick a point, and nudge it in. Make sure it's not touching the edge of the clock tower. So give it a little room, like mine is. So you see my one on the right's a little too close. I'm going to use direct select and click on that point and nudge it in a little bit. So we can always direct select any points once we have them and kind of adjust them a little bit. So the white arrow is direct select. The reason it's only letting us click the nodes on that line is because we locked all the other layers. all the other objects. If we didn't do that, that direct select could click any node on any line. So we could click the clock tower outline by mistake and adjust one of those. Mistake or not mistake. Like if we need to adjust it, we can adjust it. All right, so now that you see we drew that line, what's another detail line that you probably see in there that's probably important? So we have the bottom window, which is that thing right there. We have the angles for the railing up towards the very top. So you see how we did that curved line? I would think we would probably want to do this area. So you see how it goes up, across, down. So I'm going to create a few lines just to give me the breakdown of where the architecture changes texture or shape. So I have 3 lines I think that are really important. The one up at the top that kind of defines the railing, the straight line above the 3 circles, because that kind of changes from brick to stucco, and the curved line we already did. So I'm going to lock our curved line that we created. Now that we have it, I'm going to go back to my pen tool and I'm going to create this detail. I'm going to hold my command key down and I'm going to deselect that line that was created and I'm going to create the straight line that goes across there. So now we have 3 architectural lines. I'm not doing the railings because if I shrink this thing down to the size of a stamp, the railings are going to become one big black blob. I'm only creating basic architectural elements. Could I draw vertical lines for the 2 little pillars here that are next to the clock? Yeah, as long as I stayed off the outline of the clock. They could potentially be a line to kind of frame in the clock, but I'm just going to stick with very basic elements. So now we have a couple more things we have to tackle. One is that little window that's kind of arched, and the other is some level of line work to define these 4 pillars where the railings are. There are 4 solid rectangles here. But I don't know that I need full rectangles to define that that is kind of the architectural detail of that part of the thing. So I think I'm going to do a basic pen line. Now, let's group our 3 lines that we created for the top half. So we probably have to unlock the curved one so that we have path, path, path. So you should have like template layer, and then when you expand artwork, there's going to be a path layer, which is the outline of the clock. We have the ellipse for the circle of the clock. Then we have a group for the windows. We have a group for the little small circles. And now we're going to have a group for the 3 detail lines. So make sure that these 3 lines are unlocked, which is your top 3 path lines. And let's draw a big selection box over those 3 lines. Right? We're not selecting anything else because everything else is locked. So really good best practice is to create elements, lock them. Create elements, lock them. That way, by chance, you don't remove a node from a shape. You don't click and touch one line to another so it becomes one shape when you want them to be independent. So let's select those 3 lines and do Command G to group them. All right, very good. Once you have them grouped, let's lock it. Now I've got to deal with this kind of railing situation we have here. And we have these pillars. So I'm going to create, where it doesn't touch the outline of the clock, which is this one right here, I think I'm going to make a box. So I'm going to take my mouse and just click 4 points. I could have used the rectangle tool, but you'll notice that I have some angle slightly to my wall because it kind of tapers out, has a little bit of perspective. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to hold my command key down and deselect. So we have that little shape created. Now, the ones that touch, in essence, the outline of the clock tower, I don't want my lines to be closed in. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a little away from the line and create a shape. So you see how I kind of made it not touch, but gave it a basic rectangular shape? I did that because if I want to embroider this or do something, I don't know that I want lines bleeding all together. So I'm going to create basic rectangles that don't touch each other. None of these elements are going to touch. They're all going to be kind of independent things. And so I'm going to then create this one, it looks like. So I got to go here. So you'll notice I'm creating shapes to define the railing, but I'm not really touching my outer line. Now this is personal choice. There are artists, designers that create symbols that are illustrations, that literally are beautiful drawings of the building, the object, the bird, the animal, the thing. Just keep in mind that there's limited output when you make something a detailed illustration. Yeah, we've come a long way, but it's still not 100% applicable. It's not 100% usable in all applications. And when you keep your symbols or your illustrations simple line art, it's really affordable for your client, because if they just want to have something done in black and white, it is super, super, super cheap. All right, so last one. So I need over here too. So I think I'm just going to click and create a basic shape. So you kind of see I kind of made my 4 shapes there, not touching the edge of the clock tower or anything like that. Now, the tricky one is that window, because the window has both straight lines and curves. So I like to start at the easy part, which is the straight line. So I'm going to use my pen tool and start in the lower left-hand corner of this window and drop an anchor. And then I'm going to take the straight line all the way up to where the curve starts and click my mouse. So you see how I kind of went up to where the... Now, the top half is perfectly rounded, just like the other arch we drew. So if you go to the top middle of that window and click and hold your mouse down and drag straight across to the right, you're going to notice that when I move my pen down, it creates a pretty nice arch. If you don't like it, you can do Command Z and try it again. Now, when I click that third point to complete the arch, I don't have to drag, because the forward anchor of the top of the circle is what created that arch. And so now I can move my mouse down and finish the window. So I'm going to hide my clock tower for a minute just so you can see what the line art should look like. So there is the basics of our clock tower so far. So we have an outline, we have the circle to the face, we have the 3 window details, we have 3 separate detail lines to give us the different areas of separation in the clock tower. We have the 3 circles that run across the middle there. You'll notice that mine are equally spaced apart, which I think the wreath threw me for a loop, because the wreath made it look like that one was just slightly off center. But that's the personality of it, I suppose. And then I have 4 lines to basically create shapes for the little walking pillars, and then I have my window there. So you're starting to see now, it's definitely a clock tower, or some kind of architectural building. Once we put the hands on that thing, I think we're going to be a little better off.
How did you get your thing so curvy?
Yeah, so you know, if you drew a center line down from the middle of that window, so you see right there, that's where I clicked my pen to pull right, to get that first half of the arch. So my lines are node here, node here, node here, click and drag to the right so that that curves. And then when you let go and you click here, it automatically fills in the second half of the arch. So if you pick the center apex of kind of that curve, that will help complete your curve. And as a good rule of thumb, when you click and hold your mouse down to drag the forward anchor, and you're going completely 90 degrees to the side, you want to go about halfway between what that second set of arch would be. So like when you're dragging your anchor, and that will continue your curve at the right kind of arch level. 90 degrees right or 90 degrees left will always give you your next dot a really smooth curve. The trick is how far do you click and hold the mouse down and pull the anchor to make sure that you get a curve that's deep enough or long enough. You can always use your direct select and delete a dot or a line if you unlock it and you want to try it again. But you should have something that kind of looks like that. So I'm going to deselect, and then I'll turn back on my clock tower so you can see what we have going on here. All right, anything else besides the hands of the clock face, I guess, that we should have? Do you think we should have a detail line that follows this shape? I don't know.
I think we should stop because less is more.
Less is
This
more.
is a lot of more.
In a lot of cases, less is more. It's just a matter of whether we need that line to define that as a railing. Because the only thing that line would do was define that that brick wall ends and the railing starts. Well, let's see what it would look like anyway. So let's take our selection arrow and let's make sure that we have the 4 lines that we used to create that little wall, that little railing separation. Let's make sure they're grouped. So if yours doesn't say group, 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 because we have 4 groups in a row, then we need to make sure that we have those grouped. Are you okay? Well,
Yeah,
okay.
I just have a lot more groups than that. I was just grouping every element.
That's fine. That's fine. As long as you know it and that's how your brain works, I'm fine with that.
Perfect.
Yeah, if you group 2 lines and then group the next thing, you could, in theory, group them by level of tower, too. So like the top 2 lines and the 3 windows could be an object, because that's that part of the tower. So whatever works for you. The idea with the grouping is just so that you don't have so many paths. Because when you have a lot of paths, it gets confusing over there in the artwork layer side of things. Let's try a line. I don't know. It's kind of polygonal, so you don't really have to curve at all. So you could do something like this. I could see the shape of the building. It kind of is something like that. I don't know. I could select it and use my arrow keys and nudge it down a little bit. Like that. That's probably nice. We'll see how it goes. I think maybe we need that line. I'm not sold on it, but maybe. Once we put the hills in and we start putting the waves in, we're going to start getting what looks like, you know, something starts to look like a mark, a line art mark, like we did a couple of classes ago where we outlined everything and did no fills on any objects. Now, let's change. Now that we're this far, let's take a look at the properties of the lines we're drawing, because you may notice they all cap end off, which doesn't look that smooth. They're all the same thickness, which maybe isn't something we want to do. And so let's take a look at the properties of the stroke. So let's unlock, let's use our regular selection arrow, which is the black arrow at the top. Let's unlock all of the objects we drew in our artwork layer. So let's unlock all of the objects, all the paths, the groups, the ellipse, everything in our artwork layer. So the only thing we have locked is our template layer. So if we were to do Command A, it would draw a big bounding box around every line we have created. right? Everything should be unlocked, so you should see little red guidelines through all of our shapes. This is like coloring, just drawing lines around pictures. All right, now, if you have the stroke palette over on the right-hand side under one of your little multiple tabs, click on the stroke palette. If you do not, under window, you will see stroke is an option. The window drop-down is where all the palettes are stored, and the palettes are unique to our artboard. So, we set our artboard, which should be the same because I don't think there's anyone in here tinkering around with Illustrator in between classes. We chose layout as our workspace. So if you go to window workspace and you go over there, yours should be checked next to layout. And layout should give you the stroke properties over on the right hand side. If yours doesn't say layout, you can click on reset layout or click on layout to select it, and it should default back to all those palettes on the side there. Now, with all of your lines selected, which means none of the objects we created on the artwork layer have a lock next to them over here. Let's change a couple of things in our line properties or our stroke properties. You're going to see cap. And cap has the square off at the end, square off at the node, and round. So you see the middle one has round. Let's round our lines off. So right here under cap, choose round cap. And you should notice it gets a really nice end to all of our lines. So our little lines now have little rounded shapes on the end of them. In almost all of my logo work, if I'm doing line art, I use a rounded cap because it makes it a smooth end to a line and transition to another line. Now we have some choices. Are there any lines specifically that we created or shapes in this outline that you think should be heavier than other ones? Because when you change the thickness of lines, it changes the plane of sight. So if you think there's something that sticks out drastically from the other elements of the clock tower, we might want to make the line for that a little bit thicker. Is there anything in the clock tower that's really raised out? Is the clock like way out in front? Let's see what that looks like. Let's take our selection arrow and let's just deselect by tapping out in the artboard. Let's click on just the circle to the line, to the clock. And let's go over to our stroke weight and make it 3 point. I don't know.
Maybe like, yeah, maybe 3.
Maybe 2?
Yeah, I think 2 looks a lot.
All right. So 2 gives a little more substance. Then I'm gonna turn off my clock tower for a minute just so you can see what it looks like. Now, if I change the line thickness of something in my symbol, I traditionally don't do it in just one place. I try to change the line weight in at least 2 areas of the symbol to help balance the visual weight of it. So if I did that circle, I probably would do this. And I'll show you why. See how this now feels like it's in the foreground and the rest of the outline is in the middle ground? Like it brings it forward. And also if you do it on 2 ends of a symbol, it starts to unify the shape a little bit. So if I was going to do that, I would do at least that, or I would do this line. I don't know if that's important or not. It's subjective. I mean, we're still getting the idea of the clock tower. Once we put the hands in, we're really going to get an idea of the clock tower. I think I'm going to go back to 1 stroke. I kind of like it all as 1 stroke. So I'm going to click on my circle and hold down shift and click on my window. If you hold down shift, you can select multiple things at a time. And so I just did that so that I could grab 2 things. I could click on the circle, make it 1. I could click on the window, make it 1. Let me turn back on my clock tower and lock my template so you can see what we have going on here. Okay, now, let's do, now that we settled on one stroke weight with a rounded cap for the outline of our tower, let's lock all of those lines again, just so that we don't touch them, because we're going to do a couple of different things now. So let's just go back in and lock these. So if I draw a selection box, I shouldn't be able to get any lines, right? We're now back to just everything locked. All right, so let's do our hands now. We're going to do 2 lines to make our clock hands. So we're going to do one for the hour and one for the minutes. So once we draw the hour, we're going to lock it, and then we're going to draw the minutes. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're going to use the line width tool, and we're going to taper our hands so it's thicker on one end than the other. And so I want them independent lines, so that we could change the hour and minute if we wanted to. If we made it all one line, we wouldn't have that flexibility. So let's do the hour first. So I'm going to switch to my pen tool, and I'm going to start right in that center dot, and I'm just going to create a line. Will the line now be rounded at the end cap?
Yes.
Yes, it will. We changed the properties in the stroke. Now, once you create the hour hand, let's hold down Command and deselect, and then let's lock that hand, that line you just drew, over in your layers. Because now I want to create the line for the minutes. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to click, I'm going to drag it out. Should the line touch the circle? No, do not touch the circle. Give it a little room. And once you have those 2 lines drawn, let's zoom in so that we're like really close to this thing. And you should see it has a rounded end. We got something going on here. Now, once you have both those lines drawn, the hour one locked and the minute one not locked, we're going to use a tool here. So once you have those 2 lines drawn, let's make sure that the minutes one is selected. So you should have a little bounding box around it. You should have, how many nodes? 2 nodes. You shouldn't need 3 nodes to draw a diagonal line. Although I have seen artists do that before. All right, very good. All right, now, over here, underneath the eyedropper, the little thing that looks like an eyedropper in your toolbar is called the width tool. Let's click on the width tool. Now, the width tool is awesome. They needed this a very long time, and it took a long time for them to get this tool. But let's move our mouse to the node closest to the center of the clock. So I've moved my mouse to the node closest to the center clock, and I'm going to click on it and drag in and out. Look at how we can taper our line. So I want you to make that end fatter. I'm not trying to offend the line, just make it a little thicker. I'm recording the desktop, so the first block of time here. Everything go okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, just a little out of the way.
Yeah, all right, no problem. So you should taper that end. Now, let's lock the minutes, unlock the hours, and we're going to do the same thing to this line. Taper the end. Can we now change the clock to any time we want?
Yes.
Yeah, we have tapered lines. Thick and thin is personal choice. Just make sure that it isn't super thin at one end, because that would be hard to replicate when we scale this thing down. So just make sure that one end at least has a decent amount of thickness. Can we taper this thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin? In theory, yes. If we take our mouse and click somewhere else on that line, we could make this thing thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin. For hand purposes, I don't think that's a good idea. Now, I'm going to go back to my selection arrow. I'm going to make sure that the minutes and hour line are unlocked. And now, look when I select. I could rotate this and make it any time I wanted. Yeah, I'm going to come right over. So I don't know. What time should we make it? All right, let's zoom in just a little bit so we can see what we got going on here. All right, so there it is. So click and drag. It's already tapered a little bit, so let's grab the end of that. See the end? And we're gonna see where it touches that. You added an extra point, so you see that right there. So let's just do 100 and get rid of that.
What if we just delete this line?
Well, you could. You could. So make it whatever time you want. Now that we know width tool, I wonder if there's any lines we could make thick and thin on this thing to give it a little personality that maybe now that we know we can taper lines, might be nice to have some thick and thin to it. So I'm going to zoom out just a skosh. I'm wondering if this curved line around the clock wouldn't be nice if it was a little thicker at the top of that arch to give it a little personality than it to be all one line. So let me just see what that looks like. I'm going to scroll down on my lines layer and I'm going to unlock my lines. I'm going to see if there's not something I can do here to taper some of my lines now. I don't know if that would look good or not, but I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to go to my width tool. I'm going to go to the middle and I'm going to taper it a little bit. I don't know. That gives it some personality. If I did that one, maybe I would do a little bit on this one. I don't know. It's trial and error. I don't know. You don't necessarily have to ungroup. You can just click on any of the lines and it will let you pull and drag. Yeah, once they're unlocked, you can go in and you can also direct select any node in any grouped object. So I don't know. Let me hide the clock for a minute and see if that makes a bit of difference. Love it, hate it?
Love it.
One, love it? Yeah, I'm not sure. Just from a personality standpoint, I'm going to leave it because it does give it a little personality. Could we taper the edge of this clock tower in a bunch of places? We could. We could make it like that. Make this one like that. We could make this like that. We could make this like that. I don't know. It's a style. It's a stylistic thing. So you don't, obviously. You like a ruler and a fine tip black pen and draw this thing exactly. So this becomes much more organic, right? You can see it. It looks like someone had a quill pen and they were spilling more ink in areas than others. It becomes more organic. It's not so firmly straight. It's a style
Question.
thing. Yeah.
Can we just like leave it like this and then once we have everything go back and
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We created vector shapes. So we can add, when we add color, you might want to make something thicker. I mean, you can do that. It's just our line art. So, all right, I'll undo.
Yeah.
I have peer pressure here, so.
Appreciate it.
All right, there we go. We're back in the game. All right, now, we have our clock tower created. The basic shapes of our clock tower. We're gonna lock the entire clock tower so that we can then create our mountain or our hills. So let's lock the entire clock tower. So you see the artwork layer? Let's lock that entire layer and add a new layer above it, which is the little plus symbol down in the layers palette. So see by the trash can? So I'm going to rename actually the artwork layer to clock tower by double clicking on the name. And now I'm going to rename layer number 3 that's been created. We're going to name that hills. So now I can actually hide the template layer, and you see the clock tower? That looks nice.
It looks like a train. It does.
It looks like a what?
A train.
Does it?
Oh, wow.
Now that you said that, I do see it. But is there a clock on the front of a train?
There's a bell tower.
But I can see the choo-choo part of it for sure. I can see the detail part of it for sure. Okay, now we're going to tackle the hill. The hill. Now, I like to create things in 3s. So you'll notice the thing I placed only has 2 bumps. So I'm only using it as a template, but I am going to use it as a template, a guide at least. So when I create this shape, do I want to touch the clock tower anywhere?
No.
I do not. I want a little breathing room. I know I overlapped it in my little mock-up so that I had a basic idea where I wanted things, but I do not want it to touch. So I'm going to take, do I want it to be a closed shape?
Yes.
Well,
You're not gonna fill it.
the elements I used to collage had a line. Is the clock tower closed?
No.
No, so I don't know that the hill needs to be closed. So I'm going to create a line for my hill starting in the lower left-hand corner. So look, this is just like SpongeBob. So I could click my mouse. This is a diagonal. And then I could come up here somewhere. Now, I don't want to touch the clock tower, so let's just pull a line. And then there's no, I don't have to follow this thing. I'm just using it as inspiration. So I'm just going to create, in essence, 3 bumps. So you'll notice when I get kind of to where the clock tower comes down, I'm going to make sure I put a pinpoint there. And then I'm just going to make the 3rd hill. Say that again?
Do I have to make my hill where you have yours?
No, God, no. No, it's just a guide. But I do want to make it feel like the clock tower is behind this hill. So I know I'm not touching it anywhere, but you still can feel like this is in front of. So it looks something like that when all is said and done. You can draw it over and over again. You can do undo. You can do whatever you need to do to kind of get kind of, in essence, a silhouette of maybe 3 hills. 2 doesn't cause your eye to force. It kind of automatically splits through the middle. When you do 3, your eye kind of visually tries to pick 2. Like, is it this 2 or is it this 2? It gives kind of an offset, an asymmetry to it. So I am using what I had collaged together as kind of a foundation. And the beauty about the photo is you can see by the outline that it is proportionate. The scale of the elements is proportionate. It's not exact, but it is proportionate.
Oh.
I don't know.
It's like waves.
That looks like waves? Wait until you get the water there.
I can't undo.
And we could add some green here, and then we'll know it's hills.
But they said
It needs to work in black and white for sure. I don't feel waves.
I think it's just that middle
Do we want to try straight lines? I don't know. My other concept was straight lines, so if I did this, do you feel better?
Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little
So
bit.
just for the sake of the visual.
She says,
I don't know.
I think it's giving.
Looks like something in decline. Rome is in decline,
That's-
unfortunately.
Stock market.
Rome stocks are down.
I think you
There
should
we
like
go. So,
mirror it, like transform it, you know? I feel like something about it being angled that way. is different.
because we kept all the line the same thickness, could we change the thickness of the hills?
You should.
I mean, we could. We could, so let's see what it looks like. So we'll make this a little bit more thick and thin. I don't know. So let's see. I'm going to make it thicker at the base. Ooh.
Ugh.
Smear.
Keep in mind, this is personal preference because this is style. I mean, this is the artist part of creating symbols. So, do I love that? No. But I could do thick and thin lines on this entire thing and it would look more expressive. And a client may like that. A client may line all their shoes up in their closet and they want all the line weight to be the exact same thickness. They might color outside of the lines a little bit and they want a variation of line thickness. I mean, it is style. We could create this exact same logo and copy and paste it over and over again and change the quality of the line thickness in every single one of them and it would look completely different. We could end cap it. We could change the thickness. I mean, there's so many things.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
So when you look at, when people don't have a design line and they can look at something and say that just doesn't look right, when you're talking to clients, how do you figure out what that thing you're talking about is?
So when I talk to a client, I talk about design elements.
Yeah.
So I talk about balance and unity and symmetry and asymmetry and line weight. I talk to them about the process in hopes that their brain will connect with why I did what I did. But honestly, the end result might be that they just wanted the same line thickness. Or they want that mountain bigger.
Yeah.
Or they want that clock tower smaller. Or they want the hands at 3 o'clock. I mean, there is a connectivity from the designer to the client that in the end has to happen. You have to get to the same Z. But it doesn't mean I don't use my expertise of kind of visual reference and why I did what I did. And in most cases, they'll be like, okay, I get it. Some cases, they'll be like, I think that line should be brown, and I'm sticking to it. I'm like, well, brown isn't your color. It doesn't matter. I like brown, and that's what I want. So I try to use the kind of the industry terminology, and I talk to them a lot about output. Well, that won't look right if you want to do X, and sometimes that sways their needle too. Well, I might want to do X. All right, if you want it on a pen, we can't have a super detailed thing here to run along the side of the pen in order for it to work. So that's what I tried to do.
What is the rest of my layer?
Interesting. I think you drag them onto. So let's click that little arrow right. Oh, you isolated. Double tap right here.
Oh.
If you double click on any one object, it will isolate that object. So if it ever looks grayed out around it, you just double click inside of that thing. Okay, all right, so let's lock our hills layer. Let's add a new layer and call it river with an S, because I guess there's more than one. Rivers. Now, I'm going to zoom in just a skosh. Hold my command spacebar down to pan around a little bit. Now, there's only one wave in my river that isn't really touching the hills, which is this one right here. So I'm going to use this one as my guide, this shape. And then I'm just going to copy it and make copies of it to kind of give me 3. I'm just going to probably use 3. So let's take that line. This one right here is kind of our guide. Look, there's no right or wrong answer. You just need to make a basic wave, right? There's no right or wrong. 3 points. It's personality. It's style. If you download vector art of a whole sheet of waves, it's going to be the artist doing their curves to their depth, to their style. So there's no right or wrong. Just make a basic 3-point kind of wavy, curvy line. And when you create that wavy, curvy line, let's switch to the width tool and make it a little thicker in the middle and a little tapered on the end.
Can we start from the beginning of
Yep,
that?
absolutely. So let's use our pen tool, and we're going to click and let our mouse go right in the middle of that wave, and then go somewhere, click and pull to kind of start that curve, right? Let go, and then move kind of towards the end, click and drag this way, and create a basic kind of swoopy line. Click and drag are anchors. So the more you click and drag, the deeper the curve. So 3 points is all we need. So, and I'm not even judging your wave. Like, let's just try to get something that kind of tapers a little bit, goes up a little bit and goes down a little bit. And once you have those 3 points, we can switch to our width tool, and we can go to the middle of this line, and we can taper it, just like that. Got it? All right.
Question, is there a way to like rotate things?
Yes, so if I switch to my selection arrow, you get your bounding box right on the edge of the, so scale is on the corner. If you go just a little off,
Okay.
you get rotate. Now, let's make 3 of these. So let's just do copy, Command C, and Command V when you have it selected. And here is your second one. And I'm just going to drop it in somewhere over there. And then I'm going to do Command C, Command V. And I'm going to take my third one, and I'm going to drop it in somewhere over there. You can make 3 different sizes if you would like. Let's just make sure that there is some level of equal space between them so they're not like really close together. You'll actually notice from the clip art that that artist did the exact same thing. They spaced the waves so there's equal negative space around them. Yours looks like a pigeon or something. They're talking about my train. That looks like a pigeon.
There's birds in Rome.
It could be a wave or a bird.
Birds in Rome.
Very good. Now, this has a, technically, it looks like a fill, doesn't it? It looks like a shape that is kind of filled in. It doesn't have a stroke around it because we tapered it. Even though it is a stroke, it kind of looks like we traced the outside of this thing. It looks like we actually made a shape out of something. We did not use strokes to create this thing. Now, let's take our mouse and select those 3 lines. So click your selection arrow, global selection arrow, and click and drag and select the 3 lines. Now, under the object drop-down is something called expand appearance. So let's take these 3 lines that are tapered and let's expand their appearance. Did anyone notice a change?
Wait, how did you do that?
It did something. I couldn't see what it did.
Is there a line through the middle of your lines?
No,
There is not. Where is the line?
it's gone.
Uh-huh. So you see the little fill and stroke? Look at what it says.
It says
Still.
fill and stroke.
It does.
Bar.
Where was the no before? Where was the red slash before?
On the outside.
It was in fill.
Fill.
It had no fill, only a stroke.
Now
Now it has a fill and no stroke. So let's hit the little curved arrow above fill and stroke, which means toggle or swap.
Wait, how'd you do this in the first
Oh, I don't
place?
like that.
Ooh. It has to be like that because it's a river shape that's going to eventually have color in it.
Oh,
So you see what I'm saying?
yeah.
Now your stroke is a shape, object, expand, appearance. So click on your line and go up to the top which says object and hit the drop down and do expand
There it
appearance.
is.
Now the line should not be in the middle,
It's on the edge now.
it should be on the edge. Now the reason this step is important is because we might want to put a color inside that shape and a different color on the edge. If it was just a stroke, you get one option. So in theory, could you use the pen tool, change the thick and thin of a bunch of lines, put them together to make a shape, and then outline all those lines and have them as fillable shapes? Yes. This is a really nice feature that was not a feature not too long ago. The ability to taper a line and make that tapered line a shape. So as far as Illustrator is concerned, you drew the outer edge of that. Making a line and tapering it is way easier than making this entire shape by hand with the pen tool. So let's see what it looks like now to hide our template. Progress. We're coming along. Coming along. Coming along. I don't know if the waves are in the right space. They kind of look like abstract somethings.
They look like
They look like
flowers.
worms.
They do look like that worm that's not a good worm. You know what I'm saying? The thick one that tapers, they do kind of look like that. It's not a tapeworm, but it is an exotic worm, I think. We had them in Florida. They were weird.
You eat them?
I did not eat them.
Okay.
No, you're not, they're poisonous. You cannot eat them. No.
Yeah, we're both, what are you talking about?
That worm that's thick in the middle and thin at the end, and pets, if they eat them, it'll actually like kill them. They come out when it rains. It's like an African worm or something. It's like the weirdest thing. And they dry in the sun on the sidewalk, but you still can't have your animal eat them because they're bad for you. Yeah, I don't know the name of that worm, but there is one. And it's not tapeworm. All right.
I actually have a stuffed animal that was a flea that turned into a tapeworm that I got from my biology teacher.
Ooh. All right, so
Tapeworms live inside a flea.
let's zoom out a little bit. This is the beginning of our something. Let's lock our rivers. We're going to add some words to this thing. We're going to start trying to create something that's starting to look like the outline of a logo.
Can
So,
I just like type it out, or do you actually like draw the...
so we're going to type it out. So let's do a new layer, and we're going to call it type. And let's use our text tool, so the T tool. Now, you're going to notice that my template, I kind of just dropped some text in, but I did make beautiful a lot bigger than keep Rome dash Floyd. So I actually think I want to have two type boxes. One that says keep Rome dash Floyd, and then one for beautiful. So I'm going to take my cursor and I'm going to tap my mouse and I'm going to, now, upper and lowercase. There is a little bit of personality from the designer into how this is written out. We can type it in all cap letters, both lines, which means it's firm, it's got a consistent line weight. If it's upper and lowercase, it's a little more conversational. If it's all lowercase for the top line, it's more submissive, it's more quiet. Traditionally, you'll do upper and lowercase because you want the brand to feel conversational. But all caps is not wrong if we were going to do keep Rome dash Floyd all caps. But let's do upper and lowercase. So keep Rome dash Floyd. Now, we need to select a sans serif typeface. So sans serif is one where all the lines around the letters are equal in thickness and there aren't any little decorative edges to the lines. So the template font I used was Century. Of course, we don't have that here. So I'm going to pick something similar. Now, if you notice, it writes it out for you, and I absolutely love Avenir, so I think I'm going to pick Avenir. I don't know if you have Avenir, but... So I'm going to pick Avenir. I'm going to make it bigger. And let's just make it big enough. Now, you should have this little A over here in your toolbar, which is the character palette. So at any point in time, you can actually switch to your move tool and you can adjust your properties over here. So if there was something you wanted to adjust, second row on the right is how you would set the space between your letters. So if you wanted to make them a little bit closer together, you could make it a negative number. So I'm going to make them a little closer together. So it just meant we're changing it from auto kerning to manual kerning. So you'll notice my letters are about 37 point Avenir Rome with a kerning of negative 41. Just to give you, this is personal preference. Type it out, all uppercase and lowercase. Choose a font that's a sans serif. I don't care which one you pick, and make it roughly about the same size as the template, so that we have a level of balance between our symbols. So if I turn it off, it's looking like that so far. And I'm going to use my text tool and make a second text box. And this one I'm going to write beautiful in all uppercase. And I am going to make it bold. Oh, we have so many options with Avenir. Heavy, black, medium. I think I'm going to go with standard, like fat face, black typeface. And so here is my... Now, I'm just trying, just from a rationale standpoint, I'm just trying to make the overall weight or size of the letters to feel like they're in balance with the size of the symbol. That's what I'm trying to do. And you're going to notice when we outline this type and make it white on the inside basically and black on the outside, that visually this thing is kind of tucking into this thing. That's all we're trying to do. We're trying to make this feel like it's in some way, shape, or form together. Now, when you have both lines of text typed, let's select with our selection arrow both lines of text. So just draw a little selection box off the edge, select both. Group. Not yet. Under the type drop down, you're going to see create outlines. So let's pick create outlines. Oh. Object expand appearance makes a stroke line a shape. Type create outline makes type shape. Does Illustrator now think we use the pen tool and draw every shape of that?
Yes.
Yeah, it does. It just, do you need the font now?
No.
You do not. So if this was a logo I was giving to a print shop, could they open it up and not have Illustrator or a font? In theory, yes. This is in essence an EPS file now. It is just line art of shapes of things. It has been disconnected from Illustrator. It is just shapes. So let's toggle our fill and stroke and make it just outlines. This looks very similar to our first day of Illustrator, where we just placed in clip art and made it just strokes. The only difference is we used our own assets and created something uniquely ours.
Are we able to change how much space is between like, the
Yes,
lines?
yes. Now, one thing I would like to do is right over here in your stroke palette, you're gonna see a line stroke. I want you to change it to the third icon, which is outside of letters or outside of shapes. And you will now notice that this thing has the natural shape of the letter. It's not eating into it. Hide your template if you need to, and then you're going to see exactly the look of what we created. Like the first beginning, when we leave. Watch that beginning. I'm going to post the recording in the announcement section. Because it took us at the beginning of drawing the clock tower and everything. That one right there. Oh, we haven't outlined yet. So let's go to type. Create outlines. Voila. Now click on that last one. And now it's the outside of the shape. Yeah, very good.
Is this whole process what we're doing from the local icon or something?
That's the one you're going to do for yours.
Sunday, is that?
It's Sunday.
Oh.
I made it Sunday. Because we're going to add color to these next class.
Oh.
We're going to add color to these next class.
You don't know, like, the relief that came off my heart.
Yeah, on Sunday I changed it to next Sunday. Originally I wanted to have it due for Thursday, but
Yeah.
I knew our color was going to take a little
There's some
time.
assignment that's listed as due today, so let's just spin a little.
Yeah, you're perfectly fine.
Just to-
But do make sure we save this, because we're going to need this as our template. How are we feeling about the pen tool?
Easy peasy.
A little bit better because we're drawing straight lines if we need to. There is a little bit of curving, but you can do Command Z to undo the curve if you have to. You can use all photos to make an idea. You don't have to use clip art. I just had you pick some clip art style artwork so you could see what line weight looks like. Just basic shapes with lines. That's the only reason I did that. We could have a puppy, a kitten, a cat toy. Like they could just be photos next to each other and we do little outlines around them to make symbols. It doesn't have to be just simple line art, which then breaks my heart when I see people do t-shirt designs and things like that and they use the most generic stick figure thing when we did this in class and it wasn't that hard. You can make a runner with basic shorts and a tank top shape and make it feel more than the weird thing that some people do with their things. Now, you asked about the ability to select shapes and move them. What shape do you think we should move?
So I was talking about more like having more space between the lines in the letters. Like the E's in Keep Rome, I kind of feel like they're too close. Like they're too close together.
Yes. So if we click on our newly created outline shapes, we can do Object Ungroup. And now look.
Individual letters.
Individual letters. I actually think that the dash should be nudged over. And I think the word Floyd should be nudged over. Every letter is now independent. Now, why is that important? Because the computer doesn't understand typography from a spatial standpoint. It sees letters as squares. Well, we know the angle of a Y is different than the vertical stem of an H, the vertical line of an H. So if you have a Y next to an H, the space between those letters is going to look different because of the shape of the letter. So when you outline your type and you ungroup it, object ungroup, you can then manually use the keyboard and adjust the space between the letters, which is called manual kerning. It's really a requirement in logo design that you edit the space. Is the E touching the A in beautiful? Look at it. It's touching the A. I need to ungroup and nudge this A over. right? It was just naturally touching it because of the shape of the letters based on the idea that they're all squares. I would manually go in here and adjust each letter, not just one. I would actually go in and nudge everything because the space between the U and the L is further apart than the F and the U. I mean, you could see it. Could we change a node in just one letter, like adjust it?
Yes.
Yeah, watch direct select. I could pick the node that is that and nudge it. I can move it. I can literally drag it. Illustrator thinks this is drawn with the pen tool. It has no idea at some point in time it was Avenir. Do most logos customize the letters? They do. I use FedEx as the example. They made the arrow inside the negative space. They adjusted the crossbar on the E to make that an arrow in the negative space. Traditionally, the type is modified in one way, shape, or form. I could take this and extend it out and make it feel like it's connected to the E a little bit, the A a little bit. Like traditionally the fonts are modified ever so slightly. All right, last part of the composition process. Because the composition process requires us to have a horizontal version, symbol with words. It requires us to have a vertical version, which means the clock tower, the hills, and the waves have to sit on top of the words. And it requires us to have the symbol all by itself. So let's zoom out a little bit. And let's unlock all the layers but the template layer. And let's draw a big selection box over our line art. Why are the lines all different colors? Different layers. So the hill is on the green layer, the waves are on the blue layer, the clock tower is on the red layer, and the text is on the purple layer, depending on the order of yours. Let's hide the template layer so you're not distracted by the pictures in the background. Yes?
Only letting me select my wave.
Check your layers palette over there and make sure there isn't a little lock symbol.
I lost all of them. Do I need to like?
Are you isolated?
No. I believe so.
Well, let's lock that. I have to expand this just to make sure that they're not locked. That one is. So go in there and just double check and make sure that there aren't locks on the objects in the layer. Now, when we have all of the lines selected, let's do Command C and Command V. And you should have a copy of your creation. Command C and Command V, and you should have a copy. Could we have done, with it selected, Shift Option? Yep, we could have done Shift Option and dragged a perfect copy of it. Or you can just draw a big selection box and do Command C and Command V. Or you could do Command A and then Command C and Command V. We don't have to draw a selection box because we're selecting all of the objects. Now, we need to reposition the copy that we made of all the objects into a more vertical layout, which means the clock tower, the hill, and the waves have to be on top of the words. So big selection box, Command A, Command C, Command V. Now, with our selection arrow, we need to select just the words by themselves. So I'm going to draw a selection box and I'm going to move it like that. Now it is a happy little accident that this thing fits almost perfectly under the hills and the clock tower and the waves. Interesting. Now the last version we need is just the clock tower, the hill, and the waves. So let's draw a selection box just over the clock tower, the hill, and the waves, and do Command C, Command V. There it is. Now, what I like to do is I like to use the pasteboard as an area to put things that I might need to think about later. Now, a few things that we're going to need to think about later for our identity package is we're going to have to remember the font name. So let's use our text tool, and right over here in the pasteboard, let's write Avenir regular and black, because we need to know that, because that's the font we used for our design. So let's just write the font and the family members. So Avenir regular in black. I believe the top one was regular and the other one was black. So let's write that. And let's also take the rectangular tool and let's draw 3 little squares down in the corner of our design. So we're just going to put 3 little squares down here in the corner of our, oh, I grabbed my T by mistake, in the corner of our design, because these 3 little squares are going to be the colors boxes for when we pick our colors. So we're just going to put 3 little squares down there in the corner. So this is the beginning of our identity page. We're going to add color to this next class, and we're going to create a pattern for our style guide. So we're going to create a pattern from our elements, so we have some extra elements for our style guide. So we're going to use our templates from the announcement section, and we're going to make our identity page and our style guide page. Now, let's save this. So let's do File, Save As, and let's save this as your last name. So your last name, and keep Rome Floyd beautiful. So KRFB. So your last name and KRFB.
I think we've already named something that.
We did?
Yeah.
So let's add logo to the end of it. Let's add logo to it. If you tried to put it in your Dropbox, it would just give you a number 2, but let's add logo to it just so we have it. Now, for homework today, you were supposed to have some basic compositions of elements for your nonprofit, kind of like how we started with the clock tower, the hill, and the waves. For your homework, I would like you to pick one of your compositions that you're like, man, this is a really good starting point. And I would like you to use it as a template, just like this, just like SpongeBob, and create it into line art. So you can use your pen tool, you can use your shape tools. We want to have something that looks like this for class. You don't need the words per se, you just need this. So remember, 3 objects is probably a really good starting point. We're going to adjust them once we see what you have, but we need to see what you have in order to start customizing it or problem solving it as a logo. So for homework, please come in on Thursday with just your symbol concept made into line art. Even if it's just pen lines, I'm fine with that.
Just to clarify.
Yes.
For the Canvas assignment, it's just like the vector images and stuff that we're turning in, like arranged like.
Yes, that's what you're going to turn into me
Okay.
Sunday. So Thursday, we'll see what you have.
Okay.
We'll finalize it. We will add some words to it. And we're going to end up with something that looks like this for Canvas. The logo concept is this. So I want to have this for Sunday. But we'll have Thursday for you to massage it.
Okay, so we're not actually turning anything in.
You won't have to turn anything in today.
Perfect.
No. So just please come with this. Something outlined, some artwork. All right, gang. I think we did good.
I agree.
It looks pretty good. I think. For a concept that I just kind of put together, I think it looks pretty good. We're getting somewhere here. It is completely subjective, your artwork. So create what you think looks good. I'll be curious to see what you think looks good. That was just practice. Just practice. But I'll be able to tell how much you practice based on those. All right, let me stop my